Fasting is probably one of the single cheapest and most effective healthy weight loss tools that exist. It doesn't cost any money to buy new foods, protein bars, protein powders, or supplements. All it requires is some willpower and the ability to refrain from eating for certain periods of time. But does intermittent fasting actually work? Many celebrities like Heidi Klum, Jennifer Aniston, and Halle Berry swear by it. While I'll let you decide whether you want to look like a celebrity or not, I want to focus on fasting for healthy weight loss. Because when it comes to fasting, it's important to consider your hormones and its effect on metabolic health. So, will fasting help you lose weight, trim down belly fat, and finally feel better? My opinion is that fasting can potentially help you, and this video is going to explain why and a little bit of the how. If you're interested in learning more about fasting, what it is, how it works, and how it impacts your hormones, and how it impacts your metabolism overall, then you're in the right place. At the end of this video, I'll also provide you a sample day and a little bit of a week of what I call metabolic fasting, where I combine a metabolic focused diet and intermittent fasting. So what is fasting? Fasting is a way of eating that you can take to help improve your overall health and potentially help with weight loss. That's a pretty simple definition. And if you aren't familiar with it, fasting is simply going without food and sometimes water for a set and planned period of time. Not every day, but I'll talk more about that later. It may sound odd since we are surrounded by endless amounts of food, but if you think about it for a little bit, you'll realize that we do this naturally on a daily basis. Every night before you go to bed, you eat your last meal for the day. As soon as you wake up, sometimes you break your fast with breakfast. Usually the length of time that you fast in the morning is fairly limited and lasts around 8 to 10 hours, depending on when you wake up, how much you sleep, and how hungry you are. Therapeutic fasting works in a very similar way, except this time you are planning how long you want to go without food with the hopes of reaching a specific goal. We have to realize that humans were designed to be able to handle periods without food, and we do it quite well. Humans store fat in adipose tissue for periods when we don't have food available. That's exactly what your fat cells and fat storage is for. They contain massive amounts of energy in the form of calories, which can be broken down in times of need. So why don't our metabolisms do that normally? Why do most of us continue to gain weight even when restricting our diets and exercising more? The reason for this has to do with how your hormones influence the breakdown of fat in your body. In the presence of certain hormones, your fat cells will simply not break down and they will not shrink or decrease in size. But if you can influence those fat storing hormones, then you may be able to finally lose weight. So does fasting work, and how fasting affects your hormones? Fasting is pretty effective at weight loss because it helps normalize your fat storing hormones. It helps liberate your fat stores in your body. It reduces inflammation, helps normalize your appetite, and it reverses hormone resistant syndromes. That all sounds pretty good, right? Let's break apart each one of these in a little bit more detail. So fasting helps liberate fat stores in your body. That sounds really awesome. To initiate fat breakdown, the key lies in activating an enzyme called hormone-sensitive lipase. This enzyme, also known as HSL, is absolutely crucial for the process of lipolysis where fat is broken down. This is a good thing. Without its activation, fat cells remain locked, impeding your weight loss efforts. Hormone-sensitive lipase lives up to its name by being responsive to hormonal signals, particularly insulin levels. Elevated insulin levels signal the body to preserve fat stores by keeping HSL dormant. However, reducing insulin levels, often achieved through fasting and eating low carb, prompts the activation of HSL, facilitating fat breakdown, a very desirable outcome when it comes to weight loss. Interestingly enough, the timing of HSL activation varies. Some individuals may not experience it until after extended fasting periods, potentially explaining why intermittent fasting doesn't yield consistent results for everyone. The next one, fasting reverses hormone-sensitive syndromes. Hormone-resistant syndromes such as leptin resistance and insulin resistance play an important role in obesity. I am sure if you're watching this video, you've heard about one of these two, especially insulin resistance. Both leptin and insulin are considered adiposity signals created by the body and are meant to reflect the total amount of fat stored at any time. It's the way that your fat cells can communicate with your brain. When there is excess fat stored in the body, your body will release higher and higher levels of leptin to tell the brain what is going on. Resistant syndromes are created when the body develops a resistance to these hormones at the cell level as levels become increasingly high. This creates a phenomenon in which you can have high levels of both insulin and leptin, which is largely ignored by the brain, which is a bad thing. Leptin as a hormone is normally secreted by fat cells, and its job is to tell the brain to increase metabolism and burn fat. It does this by communicating with your hypothalamus as it passes through the blood-brain barrier. In a state of leptin resistance, the brain is resistant to this message sent by the fat cells and instead thinks that the body is in a state of starvation. I'll talk a little bit more about this later with starvation mode. The net result is a decrease in metabolism and an increase in hunger when you are already overweight and obese. You can see why this is a bad thing. This tragedy of events in weight loss resistance can make standard diets fail. Both insulin and leptin resistant syndromes can be potentially reversed with good fasting protocols. Next one, fasting helps normalize your appetite. Fasting's ability to regulate appetite might seem counterintuitive, but let me clarify this sequence of events. Initially, fasting can trigger hunger pangs, but as time progresses, the hunger tends to diminish as your body generates ketone bodies from fat breakdown. These ketone bodies then play a pivotal role in modulating appetite-regulating hormones such as CCK and ghrelin. These hormones not only influence appetite, but also have broader impacts on hormone balance, body weight, and overall metabolism. Disruption of these hormones can occur due to certain foods commonly found on the standard American diet or the SAD diet, leading to persistent hunger, cravings, and regardless of recent meals, it doesn't matter. Fasting serves as a good approach that may help restore balance to these hormones, thereby normalizing appetite and reducing your cravings. Lastly here, fasting helps normalize fat-storing hormones. Studies have shown that going without food has a positive impact on insulin regulation in the body. And anytime you can have a positive effect on insulin, you know that you're on the right track to health-focused fat loss. Restricting the food you eat for 4 to 8 periods has been shown, 4 to 8 hour periods, has been shown to help reduce body weight, improve fasting blood sugar, and level out blood sugar throughout the day. Much of this is accomplished through the effects of insulin. Insulin is a fat-storing hormone that is secreted in large amounts after you eat meals in, yes, carbohydrates. Bread, pasta, cereal, and all these foods trigger the release of insulin because the body wants to take those foods and either use them for calories or store them for later. Most of the time they get stored for later in the liver. This is great if you have a temporary abundance, but if you have a constant, consistent abundance, it leads to insulin resistance, chronic fat storage, and it makes the fat that you have even more stubborn and hard to get rid of. So now we have an overview of fasting and especially how fasting affects your hormones, and it really can positively affect your hormones if done correctly. So now I want to talk about calorie restriction and how it correlates and how fasting can affect calorie restriction, because calorie restriction is not a great thing. Because fasting is a form of calorie restriction, it's important that we spend some time talking about how fasting can impact your metabolism. Like calorie restriction, if fasting is prolonged for an extended period of time, it may cause more harm than good. One of the reasons that losing weight is so difficult with calorie restricted diets is because of the impact it has on your metabolism. If you restrict calories for too long, your body alters the number of calories that it burns in an attempt to preserve muscle mass. This is achieved through a reduction in TRH and TSH, circulating thyroid hormones, changes in mitochondrial efficiency where energy is produced, and overall energy expenditures. This is commonly known as starvation mode or metabolic adaptation, and there's tons of research on it, so it is a real thing. As your metabolism decreases, it becomes almost impossible to keep the weight that you lost off, especially as you increase your calories back to normal. And that happens time and time again. You go on a super calorie restrictive diet, eventually you need to actually eat, and your body's like, what's going on? And you gain all the weight back plus more. It is felt that this single change is responsible for the large failure of calorie restricted diets and why around 99% of the people fail to lose weight and keep it off. Fail to lose weight. A lot of people do lose weight, but the most important thing is that it comes back. So the question is, does fasting cause the same effect? Well, of course it can. The goal when fasting is not just to reduce calories, but to also optimize your main metabolic factors like digestion, liver and thyroid health, and your muscle tissue, which I like to call metabolically active tissue because that's the tissue that is going to burn the fat. In this way, doing it this way, you will go through periods of feasting, normal eating, and periods of famine, fasting. As long as you don't keep your calories persistently low with too much fasting, you should not trigger the starvation mode or the metabolic adaptation that tends to come with calorie restrictive diets. This allows you to reap the benefits of calorie restriction by being in a caloric deficit to lose some weight without any of the negative side effects. While you could do 24-hour fasts, I recommend a 16-8 approach. I created an intermittent fasting process called metabolic fasting. So I want to go over what exactly a sample metabolic fasting week would look like. So metabolic fasting, it's a 16-8 method, but with specific macronutrient ratios to balance hormones and optimize your fat burning metabolism. So here's what a typical day would look like when you're fasting. 7 a.m., wake up, have some lemon water. 8 a.m., you're skipping breakfast, you have some coffee or tea. You don't want to add any calories to your coffee or tea, ideally. You can add a natural like stevia sweetener, but even then, you could be potentially affecting your insulin levels. And then finally around 12, you can have lunch. And then of course you can have a snack because I'm sure you're going to be hungry. Then you have dinner. And then after dinner, you will begin your fast. So you could do this 3 or 4 times per week, but no more than that. The other 3 or 4 days of the week, you could do a metabolic cycling type of diet where you eat more carbs on exercise days and go low carb on non-workout days. Obviously, the 16-8-hour windows doesn't have to be an exact science. It can be give or take some days. But what you should definitely focus on is, number one, my favorite all-time thing, food quality over quantity first, because when you are satisfying what your body is craving as far as nutrients and macronutrients, then a lot of times you won't eat extra. Then you want to only do intermittent fasting 3, no more than 4 times a week. I want to really reiterate this because calorie restrictive diets are like my all-time nemesis. And while I love what intermittent fasting or metabolic fasting can do, is sometimes you can accidentally eat too few calories. So I definitely want you to focus on that. Eating balanced meals, proteins, fats, and carbs, high quality proteins, grass-fed beefs, organic chickens, wild-caught fish. If you're a vegan, hemp-based stuff, quinoa, lentils, whole foods. Avoiding all the inflammatory foods, especially if you need to lose a lot of weight. Gluten, soy, non-organic dairies, polyunsaturated fatty acid oils, which is probably the worst thing and the first thing you should start avoiding. And then your fats, of course, saturated fats are good, coconut, that type of stuff, monounsaturated olive oil, avocados, macadamia, cashews. And then your carbs, I want you to be calorie and carb conscious. Carb conscious meaning I don't want you to avoid carbs completely, but just be conscious of what carbs you're eating. Definitely all the green vegetables, some starches, especially on workout days if you can kind of strategize that. But you do not have to avoid carbs completely on intermittent fasting. In fact, because you're on calorie deficient and you're focusing on high quality foods, then some days, like on the metabolic cycling, you can just go to brunch, have mimosas, have pancakes, do whatever you want. Unless you just like really need to go a period of time, 3 months of like being super strict because you have at least 25, 30 plus pounds to lose, then I would for sure go on a super strict type of diet. If you're working on those last 5 to 10 pounds and have done low carb a lot in the past, I would not avoid carbs. Most people who start intermittent fasting end up right where they end up with any diet. They lose a bunch of weight, feel great, but then the weight starts creeping back. Then you start up again and repeat the vicious cycle of losing weight, losing weight, and gaining it back. That doesn't sound like any fun if you ask me. And I've coached thousands of people that are struggling with this same problem, which is why I created an intermittent fasting program with a metabolic twist. See, most fasting experts just tell you to fast a day or a certain number of hours, then eat whatever you want when you aren't fasting. This approach might make you happy, but it's not helping your hormones. And hormones are my wheelhouse. In order to prevent regaining weight, you need to focus and address your hormones, your metabolism, and your overall health. My mantra, get healthy to lose weight, not the other way around. Metabolic fasting is my solution to bad intermittent fasting programs that promise results that just don't last. Metabolic fasting focuses on balancing your hormones, boosting fat-burning hormones, and stopping fat-storing hormones. Optimizing your metabolism, getting into fat-burning ketosis for a period of time, using glucose correctly, and of course, upgrading your health. And balancing your macronutrients in a way that keeps your taste buds, metabolism, and hormones super happy. Anyway, if you liked a little bit of taste of metabolic fasting, click the link in the description and I'll send you my 24-hour metabolic fasting reset guide absolutely free. I also have a link to my metabolic fasting program, the 3-week intermittent fasting diet, where I offer 2 different versions and you get them both in the program. A low carb version if you need to lose a lot of weight and get into ketosis and lose a ton of weight in a short period of time. I've had some people lose over 20 pounds in 3 weeks. And then the non-low carb version where you can eat carbs. If you're like in a maintenance mode and just doing it for health and maintenance, then you can start with this program. I hope you learned something from today's video, and whether or not you want to look like a celebrity is up to you. But my goal for you is health-focused fat loss using any diet that you want to do, because any diet can work if it's done the right way. And if you want to try intermittent fasting, then I suggest you try it with a metabolic twist or by using some of the strategies you learned in this video. Until next time, thanks so much. Subscribe if you're first time here, and I would really appreciate a like on the video.